Oh, welcome to another exciting night of PVN, and tonight we have me Z, and we have ADC to my right. Tonight we also have a special guest that we're going to be bringing on in a second. We're going to be discussing a specter that is haunting the West, and it's not communism. In fact, it's an oxymoron. It's actually called MAGA communism. And generally, we don't usually get on in the Twitter bouts about things like this, but this is one of those things that's really silly, and it's too silly to ignore, and needs to be called out. And
100%.
after that, we're going to be going over the railway strike, and what happened, how it there was an agreement reached. Was the agreement enough, and it was what the workers were looking for. But before we get started, we're going to bring on Renne. What's going on, Renne?
Hey, how are you?
Good to have you back on.
Thanks. Glad to be back on.
Good.
Thanks for the invite.
Oh, it's no problem. I don't think you've ever been on ADC before.
No.
Yes, he's
Great to meet you.
he's our resident international. He's
The international correspondent in Alberta, Canada.
Nice.
Yeah, he's our Canadian correspondent here. So, but first off, before we get started, can you want to tell everybody what you do and where they can find you?
So I'm really just a regular working person, right? Like I'm an educator. But I like to talk about real stuff on Twitter, and I find myself in a lot of trouble in arguments often because I tend not to hold back and not to be quiet about it. That's my handle down there at the bottom, Johnston 815. Really, I just want people to be real, and I'm finding less and less people that are that.
Mostly, I see it'll be like a very spicy. It's like they're not spicy takes, but they get turned into spicy takes because people are like sensitive about stuff, and they don't want to like be real about stuff. And but you're just like no, that's bullshit. Firebrand.
I really feel like it's important to like tell the truth, right? Like you don't have to agree with me. I'm not saying you have to think I'm right, but it's my truth. So you can't tell me that my truth is wrong, right? Like people who tell me like my concern with racism is me being overly sensitive or like, it's identity politics and I'm like, okay, but you don't live in my skin and you don't know what it's like to every day have like if you're sick of me talking about it, imagine my life living it like every day. You know what I mean? So,
exactly.
Right.
And another thing I see is a lot of things get taken out of like context a lot of the times from a lot of those people, and they'll just like stick on one thing, and they'll just like keep repeating the same argument, which it doesn't even like makes a lot of times doesn't even make sense. Speaking of which, a argument that does not make sense. Recently, Mr. Jackson Hinkle has been on the tour of talking about a thing called. Well, first off, we talk about patriotic socialism. And patriotic socialism was this movement that we saw a bunch of lefties online, and these lefties were, they were going around and they had the American flag in their bios, and they were trying to take it back, saying this is patriotic, which is so many things wrong with that already. But recently, in the past like week or two, we've seen that this movement has been morphing into something a little bit more. MAGA communism is what they're calling it. They're trying to align with MAGA voters and try to make them communist. So
no, I you know what? It's like this red-brown alliance that people keep trying to sell me on as like a thing, right? If you're MAGA, right? You already have multiple issues. One, like when was America great? I'm still waiting for like this mystical time in history when like America was this great place where everybody was happy and everything was good. Two, they all forgot like geography because we're actually the United States. We're not America. There's like a great span of what is actually America. So like,
exactly.
Where are we talking about exactly? And three, these people literally support a billionaire. I mean, he's kind of a fake billionaire because his money's not real, whatever, however you want to put it. But it couldn't be further from the concept of communism, Marxism. Like, I don't even understand how they've decided to put these two things together because they're so far in the opposite direction from each other. But I mean, I guess you can make a go at anything with a pound symbol, you know, like.
One thing, Noli, Ware, Luden, and I don't know who else is out there. What's going on, y'all? If y'all want to, hit that like button and, get some people to keep getting in. But like, we can get this conversation going. But like, as far as like MAGA communism, like, it seems like, why are they, in my opinion, why are you going after people who don't share? Why are you going after them? There's so many people that you can be going after. You don't see that, but they're conflating it with the usual thing. You see people conflating white working class together. And it's like, yeah, but the working class isn't just white. That's like, the working class doesn't have a color. It's like, there's a bunch of working class people. But it seems like they're just trying to cater to one specific type of person. And recently I saw that clip of him on Tucker Carlson show. And it was, he was saying some good things, but then you start hearing things about you see like buzzwords like globalism, and you hear like another thing like he's like, yeah, Joe Biden is funding Antifa as if Antifa is has a headquarters or something. Like Antifa just means you're anti-fascist, which most communists should be. And so that for me, that was a red flag. He's been sending red flags for weeks, but that was like, that's a giant red flag.
Right. I mean, and I know this is gonna get, Hinkle is such a moron. Like I can't I can't get down with him. And I know people would be mad and whatever, like I don't really care. But I cannot. First, teachers and nurses weren't working class, and then he was about the working class, but he didn't really know who they were. And like, I feel like he's on this real mission to just make as much money as humanly possible off of his grift. And so he's going to say whatever he thinks is going to bring people to the table, right? Is going to get people talking, get the bots going, like whatever it is that's working for him. And so
I want everybody to put a pin in the grift thing. We'll come back to that in a second.
Yeah. And it, it really, what bothers me most is the distraction of it all, right? Like,
exactly.
Now everybody's talking about this thing that literally cannot exist. You cannot be MAGA and communist at the same time. Like literally, it's not possible. It's just theoretically, it is impossible to be both of those things simultaneously. And so now there are all these conversations about whether or not this thing exists. It's a distraction. It don't exist. Don't talk about it. It's like, it's not, but you have to talk about it.
I think that's
because
funny.
You have to point out that it doesn't exist. Like
I want to talk about that because my wife and I were having a conversation about should we cover this, because she was like, this is just a big distraction. You got the railway like strike going on, but I'm like, and we're just going back and forth like, but you have to cover it though, because we have to, because like it's so stupid, and this person he actually has a reach now. It's not like he's just like, he's more than in the corner of the internet. He's literally just was on Tucker Carlson getting like he could. It's just so, it's dumb and it's oxymoronic, and like you said, nothing that communism stands for, or fascism. Fascism is like literally, because I'm writing a thing on fascism right now, so I've been studying a little bit, and it literally it's antithetical. It was literally made scientifically to counter socialism. Like
right.
It's very silly that like it's a grift. And speaking of grifts, first, I want to play this video on the what that we're looking at right here on this page. It's from Haas, and he's another one of the Pat Socialists. And it's very funny because right after, you see, after Caleb Maup and I suppose, like went down, they started going in this MAGA communism thing. So we saw that like a couple of weeks ago, and now they're switching. They're like switching now that he's been like dethroned or taken out. So let's get that video and see. And this is Haas, and
3 seconds.
MAGA communism. MAGA communism.
How is that even serious?
It's not.
I can't say I can't take these people seriously. Like, I want people to understand, like, when these things happen, right, and this nonsense starts, it is all to prevent people from focusing on the things that are most important, that would allow working people to truly change the material conditions in which they live, right? Like, in the end, that's what should be the focus, right? Like, I don't want to talk about racism all the time either, but my material conditions cannot improve as long as racism continues to be a guiding factor for every system, law, like everything that occurs in this country. So, yeah, it would be great for it not to be a thing, but like, I can't change that on my own,
It
right?
just shows how willing.
Possible.
It just shows how willing they are to like sweep people like us under the rug, you know? Like,
Right.
it's just like, we're gonna trade, like, so that's what we're gonna like trade in for, like, so we can like get our material conditions better.
And it's also so they could do this whole, like, oh, look, see, we're trying to get everybody together so we can all fight for the same thing. Like, we're not fighting for the same thing, okay?
No.
Because while you're carrying on with these dummies about this nonsense, right? Like, I'm not gonna get the things I need. My kid's not gonna get the things he needs. Like, the native people from this land who have already lost everything because they were colonized and everything was taken away, like, they're not gonna get what they like. It's just this constant, like, rigmarole of like one new thing that's nonsense after another to be a distraction, so people stop talking about the things that are really most important, that could actually have some effect on their material conditions. Like, it's brutal.
100%. And Johnny has some points there.
I want to shout out Johnny Axum.
Like,
he's throwing hard in the chat.
Yeah, not interested in this National Socialist German Party, of course not. And he's going to be a millionaire. That is the scariest thing. Is it's all these trends. It's everything that goes viral can make a bunch of money. I mean, how the hell did Kyle Rittenhouse get away with what he got away with and had that much funds raised for his legal fees? It was all based on the attacks or attaching themselves to this MAGA thing. And what people got to understand, MAGA is it's an advertising campaign. I mean, Reagan used it to promote the evangelical march in the 80s.
Exactly.
We're going to make everything great again. We're going to make it all Christian white again. And it was never great in the first place. Like you said,
well,
Renne,
I mean, not for regular people.
No.
Like,
so great for the elite.
And when the rich white people were super, super happy because, they had slaves and, nobody could really do anything against, their livelihoods, then sure, if that's what you're aiming for, we're certainly headed back in that direction. But like, that was a small percent of the population that was happy.
And that's what we're not talking about, like January 6th. Like, it was like those people, most of those people were like a lot of those people were just owner class, like in the first place. That's why they were out there. Nobody normal has the time to just like take off like 3 or 4 days to drive up, go to another state. There's people
people have to work. They gotta pay bills. Well, they have children. They have to make dinner. They have to it's this idea that like, oh, these people, we're all in the same place. Like, no, we're actually not. We're not at all in the same place. Like, not even. And I'm okay, right? Like, I have a job. I have insurance. Like, we live in a nice place. Like, we're okay. But at the same time, I know, like, I'm in a chunk with a majority, like one bad thing in my house, and we're gonna have a problem, right? Exactly. Like we're not swimming in it, like, but we're okay. We're doing better than a lot of people, but that's not enough. It's not enough for me to pretend like everything's fine, and it's not enough for me to act like other people's concerns aren't important enough to talk about and to be concerned with. Like, people should really understand, like, your community is as healthy as your sickest person, right? And so if you have a family in your community that can't eat, that, the housing is a mess, who they can't pay their rent, like, that is your community. That's who you have to worry about making sure can survive. If you live in a food desert, that's a problem. Like, how come you can't buy fruit in your community? Like, these are things that nobody's talking about, but I gotta listen to Hinkle's dumbass talking about like, oh, we're gonna bring the Marxists and the MAGAs together. Like, what the hell are you even talking about? Like,
I think it's funny how like fast some like just because you're like, don't make it about race, but do you see how fast like this little 22-year-old white kid is just shoots up, goes straight to the top in the media talking about this nonsense and he doesn't even know what he's talking about. It's like apparent. No black person could ever get that. You'd be questioned so hard until like you get the fuck off the internet. There would be no like, oh, okay, tell me more about this MAGA communism.
Right.
Well,
and I'd like to point out, like, part of the
would...
reason he's become so popular is because he's a door puppet. Yeah. And Door has happily elevated him and pretended like he has sense. And people get mad at me for that too. And I'm like, I don't know what you want me to do. Like, if they're elevating people who are talking absolute shit, like, why do I have to pretend? Like, why is it my responsibility to pretend like what they're doing makes sense? Like, I don't have it in me. I'm too old for it. I don't have it in me.
And we want to get on that grift thing. So can we get that video playing? It's just pretty much talking about Jackson Hinkle selling gold, the same gold as like, Steve Bannon and other right wingers.
The most prime opportunity that you've ever probably been given to protect your wealth. So go talk to my friends at birchgold.com/Jackson. Please safeguard your wealth against inflation and diversify your savings in gold and silver. It's a little known IRS loophole that those in elite circles know about, but you've probably never heard of because they don't tell us these secrets. Why should you do it right now? You got Joe Biden that's putting the entire strength of the global dollar reserve at risk so he can wage a proxy war with Russia and soon enough a proxy war with China. They're putting everything on the line because of their delusional imperialistic fantasies, and that includes putting your wealth on the line because your wealth is currently probably attached to the dollar. We have an inflation crisis, the likes of which we haven't seen before we have, the decline of real wages. This is the time now more than ever before to go talk to my friends at birchgold.com. You get a free kit on our website. And the other reasons why you should work with them is because they're not some stupid business. They work with the man, the myth, the legend, Ron Paul, and they work with me. They're a great company. Go check it out. Go give them a, talk.
Ron
I would say the most.
Oh, like, good Lord.
I
don't know if
Tea Party politics.
We watched the documentary series on the anarchists. I don't know if you saw that. It was HBO. From day one, it was white privileged people that decided they were going to move to Mexico to get away from U.S. laws and basically to avoid all taxes. And the giant grifter there that ended up doing this thing, it was Acapulco, but it's Anarcapulco or whatever the hell he called it. And this moron brought in Ron Paul, and all it was to bring in the Bitcoin. So I was just waiting for Jackson to talk about, well, if you don't like gold, you can always use Bitcoin because Bitcoin is the future. As we watched the thing go in the toilet.
The best is, so I watched it when you shared it on our group chat. And he's like, this is the thing that the elites know that we don't know. And I'm like, but bitch, you just said it. So obviously you know.
I love that's the standard, like the standard Alex Jones like thing where it's like, this is what they don't want you to know. Take this medicine.
Like you're currently making money selling me on this thing that I don't know, that you're with me on not knowing, but you're telling me. So obviously, like, we're not on the same page here. Like, we're not in the same place.
Let me sell you a timeshare, bro.
Right.
For communism.
The worst part about this guy and about the people that are connected to him and whatever is the fact he's actually speaking truth on some aspects. Like, when it's like if you start to agree with these idiots, then you start to wonder, holy crap, what the hell's wrong with me? I mean, I question Biden. I question the authority. I question ACAB. I mean, I question how C-19 was dealt with. All this stuff, but the only ones that are getting any airplay.
But that's how they get you, right? Like every bad thing that needs to draw people in, this is exactly the playbook, right? Like they give you just enough so you start to think, oh, well, you know what? That makes sense. And then they start throwing in the things that you question, but you're like, but they said this thing that made sense last week. So maybe this thing is like, and then you start getting drawn in. And the next thing you know, you're like in this pit of nonsense because you listen to the first thing they said, which was really said to make you listen to them, right? Like it's strategic. Right. It's very strategic. Like, and I feel so horrible because right now I'm going to forget. The Right podcast did a great like breakdown, and it was long, but it was great.
The Right podcast?
About Jimmy Dore and how if you really dig into some of his topics, you can backtrack it to Fox News. Like all he does is follow the algorithm, right? And like this whole, oh, he's speaking for the working class. He's not working class. He's a millionaire.
Yeah.
He sits in his garage and he makes videos and people pay him hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And then he goes and does a comedy tour and makes the millions again.
Right. Like he is not a regular working class, like slow joe. Like he's not. So this story that's being sold that like, oh, we're all in the same page and we're all having it. We're not. We're really, really not, because he is not worried about the next bad thing that's going to happen. That's going to prevent him from being able to pay his mortgage. Like that's not on his list of worries right now.
100%. And these guys, like I watched this whole interview this afternoon, and it was fantastic. And
we're gonna play
it's
3 minutes. We're probably like 3 or 4, about 4 minutes of it.
Yeah,
is totally reasonable to assume, right? Especially with some of the actions and especially the name calling and then all of the ways that this has been approached, right? Can definitely get the sense that this is not serious. But even if we were to concede, right, that all right, grifting this or that, whatever, like we can concede. Let's just take that, shelve that. When you just look at the idea, however, right, the idea of this, I think the most poignant point that you made and that I wholeheartedly agree with is that there's no reflection upon what this means strategically, right? Because on the one hand, if you are a working class white person who lives in a Trump-dominated area, right, and you're trying to organize them in some kind of way, this is just an abstract thing, you're trying to organize them some kind of way toward socialism, then if that's your strategy and you're just doing a poor job by saying we're going to do MAGA communism and that's the strategy, then I think I would be a little more forgiving and even just more open about this as a trend. But that's just not what it is, because there's this big kind of elephant in the room of, well, you have the majority of young working class people already thinking about socialism. You have the material conditions where you have most people in the United States either holding their nose for either party or not voting at all because, as you said, they're disenfranchised or they're just not voting. So you have this massive base of people who are willing to talk about alternatives, third parties, socialism. And we're focusing on a very small subsection where only a small subsection of that MAGA camp, if we can even call it a MAGA camp, people don't vote for Donald Trump or anybody really underneath MAGA all the time. People swaying back and forth. If you want to focus on the entire working class, then why is it that there's so much of the working class that's being ignored? And with this framing, it inherently alienates a large subsection of that working class. For me, my big problem is you are seeding everyone who is, you could call them under the Democratic Party camp or maybe fun terms, right? America was already great camp, because that's how the Democratic Party views the MAGA camp, right? It's MAGA. What are you talking about? America's already great. That's what Hillary Clinton said. That's what Obama, all these neoliberals said. So you're conceding everyone who may be in that camp, but is very disillusioned by it, disaffected, and thinking about socialism, they're organizing labor unions in places that have never been organized before. They're thinking about socialism seriously. Why are we? What is, for me? What is the interest in going for MAGA? Right? What for me? It doesn't make any sense in that way. It's not good strategy. No one is saying ignore everybody who voted for Trump. Certainly, if people are open and willing to hear things and change their opinion, then of course we should talk to them. But at the same time, that's another abstract scenario. We're talking about the reality of the situation, of this being targeting maybe a very active online segment of the population, but very marginal section of the population in terms of the actual existing conditions of the United States. And we're not even talking about the rest of the world.
Yeah. So the argument that these so-called MAGA communists, who are the same as the patriotic socialists, I mean, it's the same people, and it's the same argument. And of course, the so-called patriotic socialists have a lot in common with the so-called national socialists, especially considering neither is socialist. We'll talk about that in a second. I mean, there's a significant fascist undercurrent here that we need to understand theoretically, but we'll get to that in a second. First of all, let's talk about this idea that if you oppose MAGA, you oppose white people or something, which is just insane white identity politics. These people criticize so-called identity politics. They're promoting white identity politics. The reality is that working class white people in the United States have a variety of views. Some vote for Republicans, some vote for Democrats. The majority don't vote. And again, we need to look at the actual class position of many of the people who voted for Trump. They were disproportionately petty bourgeois, so-called upper middle class, wealthy people in the suburbs, especially, what Trump called the boat owners or whatever, his great boat people in Florida.
Shout out to Johnny.
Like all of these people living in these gated communities in Florida.
All right, we're gonna stop it right here.
Owners
and
exploit multiple employees
that
and have like
Left
boats or whatever.
Lens,
The beautiful boat
that's
people.
In the source. That's in the sources. If you want to go at the bottom, Ben and Danny go over that. It's a really good 2 hours. They break down Ukraine and everything in a really good way. And I always enjoy listening to Danny Haifong and Ben Norton.
Sorry.
But yeah, I agree with that. There's a fascist undertone going with that, and just like we were talking about earlier, the people who were out there on January 6th, and the people who mostly voted for Trump were the owner class, and they don't have the same class interests and you can't. There's no intersection there.
The big thing that I think, and I have conversations sometimes because of the amount of things that I try to involve myself in with people who are considering running or who are running campaigns. And I tell people all the time, the biggest mistake that I feel like candidates make is they don't talk to people who don't vote, right? Like, it's become almost like, they're like the elephant in the room, right? Like, we're just going to ignore the people who don't come out and vote because they're not going to vote. Okay, but maybe if you give them a reason to come out and vote, maybe they'll vote. And if the people who don't vote came out behind a person, like, they're gonna win because it's that
they get crushed.
Right. Yeah. It's that many people who don't participate in the electoral process. And people, I have this fight with people all the time. Like, people don't vote that's like their stance. I'm not voting. I'm not participating in this process because all y'all are full of shit. Like, that's why I'm not voting. I don't want to participate in this. I don't want to pick a person who is less crappy than the other person on the list. Like, who wants to do that? My mother is gonna. I
don't need blood on my hands.
Seriously, my mother's gonna be 70 years old, and I can remember when I was 6, like her dragging me with her to go vote because it was so important to her that I understood how important it was, that I understood that people died for it, like this whole thing. And I'll still vote. Like I probably won't vote at the top of the ticket, but I'm gonna go. We've got some like local seats that are open and stuff like that. But my mother, 70 years old, is like, I don't think I'm voting this year. And I was like,
like, people are like not or understand. It's like, nah, it ain't work. It ain't like what I'm just gonna vote another asshole in. Like it's not
like people.
It's not working.
Right, they're sick of it, and it's this process that is in place where we are trapped between these two fools. Like we're literally trapped between two.
It's bad. Like
it's bad.
What's wild is when someone's like tries to say one fool is better than the other one, and you're just like,
no,
they literally do the same things.
Right. Like I really want to be like, but I don't want to vote for a fool. Where's my choice? Right. Well, like I don't want to vote for a fool. I want to vote for somebody who actually thinks it's important to improve my material conditions. That's who I want to vote for. Where's that person?
Well, that person's a third party or an independent right now. Like, if you're looking at the duopoly, the two-party system or whatever, both parties are fascist. One's a friendly fascist. The other one's a dirty, rotten piece of crap fascist. So that's the only difference.
Or do they just fake better?
Well, they're fake friendly. They'll stab you in the back after patting it. So you'll die from bleeding out as opposed to getting shot or having their police kill you, sort of thing.
Exactly. So, if the Democrats cared about like eliminating fascism, they would make sure that they open up they wouldn't crush candidate. They would make sure we got all the social services and things like that we needed. They make sure that everyone's material conditions were better, and they regulate it till it really was a tiny like faction somewhere. It wouldn't be as big as it is.
Right.
But they don't.
And they wouldn't invest so much energy into crushing the people who run under their own ballot line.
Exactly.
Because they won't go along with the status quo. Like, I get really frustrated because people, the minute I say anything about that's like, I don't like MPP or Jimmy Dore sucks or what, like people come out and they're like, oh, you're just a Democratic shill. And I'm like, but I'm not even a Democrat. Like that can't be the argument every time somebody says something against the person or people or organization or grift or whatever it is that you're following, that you feel like in the moment is saying the right thing. Like it's not about I dem exited. Like I can't do it anymore. I don't want any part of it.
There's a Mother Jones article that came out yesterday about like Black people being Russian bots again. Like, either you're a Democrat, a Republican, or you're a Russian bot.
I need Russia to tell me that I live in a racist place. Like I don't need Russia to tell me that. I already know where I live.
It's offensive on like so many levels. It's like you don't know any better, and then it's like they're trying to control. It's like, why are you trying so hard? It's like I'm not a bot. I've been called a bot. Like it happens.
Yeah, me too. That's why I changed my profile picture a whole lot just for that reason, because I'm like, maybe if I change up my profile picture like regularly, people will realize that I'm actually a real person.
It just doesn't make sense. And then like it's egregious. But here you go.
Oh, hey Joe.
Hey Joe. All right. Well, now that we've gotten like heated from that like exchange about like MAGA communism or something like that, we can go on to something
heated. It's just more the fact that we're just wasting our time, but it has to be talked about because the fact that we're sad that we're the only sane ones in the room right now. So basically, we're the only adults in the room. The rest of them are children. So we have to be mature and take control of the situation and make sure that everyone goes to bed on time and everyone eats and everyone does their chores. And anyway.
And I'm not gonna platform a fascist. Like we're not gonna talk. I will not debate like that kind of thing because it's like not even worth it. It's like it would be like that's just like talking to a wall who's just trying to extract cash from you.
And it's people give so like I personally like Bad Faith, right? Like not all of them, but I feel like she brings good people on and she
exactly. I enjoy it. I do too.
And people get really mad when she brings people on who have like sometimes outrageous views because they're like, well, why is she but she's also asking them questions, right? So she's having like a real dialogue about like this thing that I think is important for, let's get some clarity like on this thing. And so I don't get mad. I don't even get mad at people if you want to bring people on, you want to have these conversations, but you have to have real conversations, right? Like you have to ask the real questions. You have to make people uncomfortable. You have to do things that make it very clear that this is not about just having you on a show, like smiling and laughing and pretending like what you're saying makes sense, right? Like it has to be about having a legitimate conversation in good faith that is making it clear. Like if you have a point to make that you feel like is actually pertinent to the conversations that need to be had right now, then let that person say it. But if what they're saying is absolute nonsense, right? Like then tell the ninny, like, this is nonsense, get off my show. Like I don't need to platform you like talking about, oh, you can't organize if you don't bring in the Proud Boys. Like cut the shit. Like yeah, you can. Like you don't need to have the racists at the table. They don't.
No one ever needed that.
Right. Literally.
Like it's like, well, if we look in history, that didn't happen. And then they bring up that thing with like that one flag, the one picture with the Black Panthers and the flag. It's like Fred Hampton like asked them to like take that down because it would make people uncomfortable.
It is the most misrepresented story, always by white people who made no attempt to understand what the Rainbow Coalition was about, right?
No
who
nuance.
Never took the time to understand the nuance of saying, like, listen, I'm going to have this conversation with these people that I think are racist, and I'm going to make it clear with them, like, you got to let this racist shit go, because we can't fight this battle if you're busy like behind my back waiting for us to get this thing so that you can take it from me, right? Like those were real conversations. And so this story that's being retold over and over again, like the Black Panthers worked with racists. No, they fucking didn't. They just didn't.
No,
they convinced people not to be racist in order to fight the class war, right? like it is the biggest lie, and it just keeps being told and sold over and over and over, and it drives me nuts.
And before we move on, that's the last thing. That's one of the last things I wanted to mention. The fact that there is a huge revisionist thing not with just that story. There's a huge revisionist thing going on, and that's like part of like the MAGA, like the MAGA communism thing. They're like it's pretty much like, it would only take like a settler to be able to make those kind of jumps in their head to that kind of thing. Like there's no way you could just like rationalize the things they're trying to rationalize in their head and make sense of it. Someone who's like in a settler mindset, like it doesn't track. But let's get out of there. Let's transition to something better than that. America was about to go into like a meltdown tomorrow, pretty much. Today, like all the Amtraks that got canceled for today. The railway workers were going on strike because I had no idea rail workers are actually. What do you know? They're actually not
a rough profession.
Yeah, and what do you know? They're not on the same like rules or laws as the U.S. government. It's almost like the military. Like they don't go by the same rules, and they only get like. They were literally only asking for a pay raise, and mostly they were trying to get unpaid sick days. In unpaid sick days, because they can't get more than 3 a year, and it's brutal. So they were organizing to stop, and it would have been the largest transit and the largest strike in U.S. history. Now in July, it was actually originally supposed to happen in July, but Biden postponed it. He got like 2 officials in to be able to like stop, because they have to be able to vote to strike anyways, which is kind of weird. Like there's a lot of they've learned how to like stop the flow of process.
Right. Well, it's really about the rank and file. For there to be a strike, the people who have to stop working have to agree. So that's why there's always a vote for these things when it's, when you have like an actual bona fide union. It always has to be the rank and file, the actual members who make the decision. The problem with a lot of these things is the leadership that goes to the table when it's time to have these negotiations are not always in step with the rank and file. So like,
Yeah, exactly.
I'll be interested to see if this negotiated truce that just happened, if it actually goes through, if
I
the
hope
workers
so.
actually vote for it. I'll be interested to see if that happens, because to me, I'm like, why are we fighting for unpaid sick leave? How come we're not fighting for paid sick leave?
That's
Like,
that's so little. Like I was reading this book, Bullshit Jobs by David Graeber. He talks about the fact that a lot of the unions and even the unions we do actually have in the United States, like teachers and nursing unions, are it's usually are headed by the administration, and the administration is usually the people who are making all the cash, and they are in like you said, they're in lock and step with like Democratic Party. They're in lock and step with like the corporate. Like, it's pretty much corporate, and like even in NGOs, it's the same thing. They have like it goes to the shareholders and the administration.
It does depend on like where your union is. So, I'm an educator, and our union is teachers.
Yeah.
Like the administrators have their own union. Then it is not the same thing, right?
Different tables. Yeah.
Right. It's a totally different thing. And that's important. It's important that the people who are at the table calling themselves representing the rank and file are actually part of the rank and file, right? Like they have to be a voice for the people that actually have everything to lose. Like in the end, you go on strike, you're risking a lot. Like you're risking losing your job, you're losing your pay. In these crazy times, like they send the police out to beat you up. I can't remember, there was a strike and they were sending the police out to like beat up the workers who were on strike to get them out of the way so that they could break the strike line. Like we've gone
strikes.
Right. Like, but it's like gone back. We've totally gone backwards. And I don't know if people are understanding how it is such a precarious time that we're in when working people can't get simple shit like the weekend off.
We're supposed to be having we literally even capitalists back in the beginning of the 20th century, or like by the time we get to the 21st century, everyone's supposed to at least have like a 15-hour work week.
Right.
Like if they were saying that, I'm not saying that they're the most honest people, but they knew where production was going, and we have totally we're not there.
And people really didn't understand. People are so quick to be like, oh, workers, they're so lazy, they just want money. Like I can't imagine working a job where you can call me at any time and in 2 hours I got to report to work.
That doesn't make
madness.
I couldn't do it.
That's madness.
They call it the family eater because you only see your family once a month, maybe, if you do have a family. So they usually are like, you better come on if you're single, because
and in the meanwhile they're shortening, they're making their workforce smaller and smaller, because the less people you have to pay, the more money the company can keep, which means the more money the stockholders can get, and the more money the CEOs can get, and all the money is going to the wrong place. It is never I really want to see jobs where people get paid for their time and their energy and for creating the product that is making the money. I don't understand why it is that the person at the top has to collect millions of dollars a year, and the people who are actually on their feet creating the product or selling the product or displaying the product or taking it out the box are on food stamps. Why does the disparity have to exist in such a way that the people who are literally creating a situation in which you're able to make a profit can't share in that profit? Why? How did we get to this place? And the capitalism kills, right? And you can't, I don't know what it's going to take to wake people up to how dire this situation is, because it's bad.
It's unfortunate, but the worst situations are waking people up. But it should have to. We should not be having to get to the point where people are losing people like people that are close to them or going through traumatic events themselves to be able to wake up and have empathy for ourselves and our planet and just, life in general, like just, being able to just have a decent, like, standard of living for everybody. It's been solved. It's not even an issue. So, I mean, I guess things like stopping transit, where it makes things stop, where people have to pay attention, stop things like, stopping garbage, like when the garbage men went on strike. If like we actually had like when things like that start happening, when people have to pay attention, but it shouldn't have to get to that. But
right.
Unfortunately,
and what concerns me are the people who are like, oh, like I remember there's a tweet, there was Sarah Nelson tweeted something and some idiot wrote her back and he was like, oh, my flight got canceled. What are you doing about this with all your conversations about unions? And people are so selfish. like
that's self-entitlement.
You're so worried about getting to your next destination, like you don't even care that there are people who literally cannot survive.
It's like the one day
doing the
shipping
job that gets you to your next destination. Like, how did we get to become a society filled with people who are so selfish and self-absorbed that they don't care that their simple, like, oh, this is so convenient for me, is killing other people? Like, I refuse to order things from Amazon, right? Like, I cannot bring myself to do it. I just don't want to be part of a system where my convenience allows other people to be treated like shit, right? Like I don't want to be part of that system. So I don't order things on Amazon. Like people tell me I'm crazy all the time. Like, you don't use Amazon.
Crazy.
And I'm like, no, I don't. I'm not buying anything that's going to make somebody have to pee in a bottle to come bring it to me. Like I don't want any part of that system. I don't want to be part of it.
I have blood on my hands, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean,
so do I.
Right. Like I don't judge people. Like everybody has to do what's comfortable for them, right?
Exactly.
Like there's plenty of things. Listen, I certainly use Audible, and I have a Kindle that I read on all the time. And in my mind, I'm like, well, no one has to bring me that. So it's not like it already exists in space, right? So it's not so bad. But and I'm not.
There's no ethical consumption under capitalism,
right?
No,
like
it really isn't.
It's hard. It is hard to live a life outside of our capitalist system. So I'm not gonna pretend like I'm an angel and like you're a bad person because you use Amazon. But I just feel
murderer.
Right? Like I feel like for me, that's like the one little thing that I can do. That's like like. Fuck these people. Like I'm not ordering anything on Amazon, right? Like, but it's hard. It is.
I do the same thing with Walmart.
Right, the whole system is set up to take advantage of people who need the system to survive, and it's awful.
Well, like you said, that these people have all the time, like the Hinkles and all these rich white, for the most part, white privileged pieces of crap. Have all the time. They have all the money. They're not in poverty. They're not struggling for anything. They've got the silver spoon. They've got the inherited wealth. So they can sit and do whatever the hell they want and pretend that they're in poverty and pretend that they're working class. Well,
rich people love cosplaying poor.
Yeah, the rest of the machine is going to take any of us out that are actually working class, that are actually trying to speak truth to power. Because the fact is, oh, well, this guy says you guys are okay. Yeah, that guy's got how much in his bank? Wait, you're not going to check that out because he's one of you and he loves capitalism just like you pigs do. So we're going to just allow that.
Right.
Straight up. We see. What we have to do is record. Exactly.
Yeah.
And we have to we need to give back the land to indigenous people, let them use it as they please. And I don't understand why people think that people just think that like it's going to be a bloodbath, that we bet like people who have been disenfranchised just want a bloodbath when we just want, to be to not be second class.
Yeah.
Or be treated as like actual humans. Like it's like no one's trying to like, because you can't how would we be if we like some people came up after being subjugated, and they started subjugating. This is no one's trying to do that. No one with sense is trying to do that.
And
It's very like frustrating when people, because a lot. That's another thing that goes back to like MAGA communism. People like that, they'll talk about the fact that they're like, we need to decolonize. 1 second.
Happens. Mine started talking in the background. I was like,
I've got my oldest moved out of here a couple years ago, so I've got their old room as the office / spare room, so I can do whatever. And my daughter will come in for hugs occasionally, but for the most part, Daddy's in on the show, so we got to leave him alone, sort of thing. And Johnny's right. We have to reclaim the exploited resources. And people go, I'm white privileged. Yes, 100%. I'm a white privileged settler. I never dispute that. And they go, well, you're posting stuff about indigenous peoples and about land back, and you even know. I say, yeah, I fucking know what the hell I'm talking about. Oh, well, what does that mean? It means whatever the indigenous people want it to mean, that's what it's going to mean. And I'll sit here and I'm going to listen to the indigenous people. I'm going to listen to the people of the global majority. And you're going to tell me what reparations mean. You're going to tell me what land back means, because I don't give a shit, because I've had enough of the privilege. So it doesn't matter what it means to me. But on the other side of the coin, I'm going to use this white privilege as much as the rest. Like, I've been called anti-white and an anti-white racist. I'm like, I will wear that with freaking pride, because if I could get rid of my whiteness, other than the fact I can use the privilege, I would in a heartbeat. Oh God. And we're going to have Jim Crow Joe talking. This is
20 hours of nonstop negotiations, rail companies and union officials have reached a deal, preventing what could have been an economically and politically devastating strike. The president himself calling into that meeting around 9 o'clock last night to help get the agreement over the finish line. Transportation correspondent Gio Benitez has the latest. Gio.
Hey, Phil, good morning. A strike would have almost certainly brought much of this country to a standstill, not just for freight, but also for travelers and commuters who rely on trains. Already, Amtrak had canceled all long-distance trips, and even some local routes, too. They were preparing for the worst. Commuter lines were also at risk. Now that the strike has been averted, Amtrak telling us this morning that it is working to quickly restore canceled trains. The unions and companies agreed to an immediate 14% wage increase and 5 annual $1,000 lump sum payments. This is also big news for farmers who, like so many other Americans, rely on the rail system. Many were turning to trucks, but as you know, there's also a trucker shortage in this country. Simply put, all of the industries that have been affected by this now should feel some relief as this scare is put behind us. Phil?
Gio Benitez, thank you for the details. Now, for more on this, let's bring in White House correspondent Mary Alice Parks. And Mary Alice, tens of thousands of workers were almost set to walk off the job had a tentative railway labor agreement not been reached. So first, how significant is this? And then back up a second, and why were these talks stalled to begin with?
Yeah, Phil, this is hugely significant. Washington is definitely breathing a sigh of relief this morning. You can imagine that the federal government lawmakers were completely on edge. They knew that a potential strike that could have started this weekend would have, as Gio said, really put the national economy at a standstill. We're talking about billions of dollars a day in not only freight and goods, but also just basic commuter traffic that could have been stalled. A third of the goods and services in this country still move on freight rail line. So there was extreme concern here in Washington of the impact of any strike potentially could have had on the economy. And as for why talks were stalled, I mean, frankly, this is a union issue, a worker issue. These workers demanding more pay, demanding more sick time off. And in some ways, that did put this White House, this president, in a tricky spot. Remember, you and I were on just yesterday talking about President Biden there in Detroit, celebrating his close relationship with unions. I mean, this is a president that wants to celebrate union power, celebrate the right to strike, but also is very aware that this kind of strike this weekend would have been devastating or had the potential to be devastating to the economy.
Yeah, I don't think it's lost on anyone that on the day that you and I were talking that he was in Detroit at the auto show talking about unions, he called in that night and there was an agreement here. President Biden obviously hailing this deal as, quote, an important win for our economy and the American people. What more do we know about the details of this agreement?
Yeah, well, as Joe was talking about, we know that there will be a significant increase to worker pay. That was something that was, of course, demanded and on the table. We do know that there are some concessions around paid and unpaid time off. It seems that workers will be getting one more paid day off for sick leave, for family leave, and some additional concessions for unpaid medical leave. You know, this is really interesting for me that covering this White House, that this was something that these workers were demanding, because, of course, the Biden administration had been trying to pass a national paid medical leave plan. And so I think that it'll be this moment will put a lot of pressure on this White House to potentially bring up that kind of legislation again. They haven't been able to get it done, but clearly this is something that has a lot of popular support, and workers are really hungry for that. You know, are demanding more paid time off from their employers.
It seems nothing these days, and you would know this best.
You can go ahead and pause it.
Is immune.
It's funny because they're just like running like a game for Biden. Like he's like been this big union president. It's like, no, he hasn't. He like the unions just started like by themselves. Like he was supposed to sign the PRO Act, and he never did.
Right.
It's still just sitting on his desk somewhere, or like
right. There's nothing about our government that is ever going to support a unionized effort amongst the working class, because that's going to give us way too much power.
That's something that people, I don't think, if we like really look at fascism, it's like that's one of the first things that fascism does. They take out unions. Like unions are effectively. That's the first thing that happened in Ukraine when Zelensky, when everything started. Zelensky was like, hey, he took away unions. He took away all and union is worker power. And so it's like, oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just thinking that, you know, I think you said you might show a piece of this, but when one of the workers, you know, Democracy Now! Did that piece, and the fact that there are 12 unions, right, that represent this vast group of workers means that they really are all split up, right? Like you don't have a true united union effort, and things like that really, like, it kinks up the works when it comes time to coming to a decision and coming to a final agreement that's going to be to the benefit of all of the workers. When you have everything split up like that, that's when you have these problems. And this is what the bosses do. This is what the government does. It splits up the workers. You know, we're going to let you unionize, but you all have to, you know, when the truckers were unionizing, back in Minnesota, back in the day, like, okay, but the truckers and those of you who work outside, like you do the union, right? It doesn't include the people who are inside and who work behind the desk. Like they're not part of your union because their job isn't the same. And it's a way to ensure that the working people don't unite and work together to make sure that they all fight for each other's needs. And then you have this battle, like this internal fight.
Built-in division.
Right. And it's all intentional. You know, when I talk to people and say, you know, racism is not something that, like, I don't believe in race as a construct, right? Like it's this fake thing that was created intentionally so that there could be something to point to make sure that people don't talk to each other and that people think they're better than each other. I'm well aware of the reality of why racism and race exists, but I'm not the person who benefits from it, right? So it's not to my benefit to continue to have racism exist as a thing. It's to the benefit of the people who enjoy the privilege based on my oppression because of that racism. That's, you know, so that's where the issue comes in. And whenever you have these fights between people and they want to say like, oh, well, don't use the identity politics, I say, okay, well, then why don't you tell people not to be racist? Because then we can all really work together, right? Like racism becoming the thing that separates
racism is identity politics,
right? Like it's not because I'm choosing it, it's because people are using it to keep me away from getting those things that are going to improve my material condition. So like go fight with them.
You become like when you in your house, like you know what you are. Like I'm a black man in my house. However, I'm not just thinking that the whole, like where I'm just walking around, I get some coffee, I get a drink, I'm black, blah blah blah. But you don't just do that. You are othered when you go out into the world, and that's that's when it starts becoming, and that's when it's an issue, and you become othered. And until people like understand what othering is, we're not going to get anywhere, because that's something that others put on you, like not yourself. So
Right.
Ludin, did you want to play a little bit of this? This is the Democracy Now! Clip. Did you have a specific timestamp that you wanted to
I wish I could remember, because he breaks down the separation of the unions and how dangerous the fight is, because there are 12 separate unions. And I think it was something that really stuck out to me, but I can't remember the time. I don't want to lie, because I don't really remember what the timestamp was, but it was when the gentleman's talking, who is actually one of the representatives from the rail workers.
Craft Solidarity Caucus of railroad workers across North America. We welcome you to Democracy Now!, Ron. This news came out a few hours before Democracy Now! Went on the air. Can you talk about this tentative deal? What was at stake for the workers and for rail across the country?
Well, good morning, Amy. It's pretty early out here on the West Coast. I did get the news. I think all of us are now trying to make some sense of what the tentative agreement is without actually seeing that agreement in writing. It's very hard to make any kind of statement of support or opposition to it. It does sound like the three major sticking points for the operating craft unions were these basically three issues. Most over-the-road freight train operators in this country, engineers and conductors, have traditionally not had any paid sick leave. So that was issue number one. It sounds like the tentative agreement grants a single sick leave day, which is a bit of an insult, one would think. Most workers have 10 to 15 sick days, I believe. So it sounds like the tentative agreement has one single paid sick leave day. Also, it sounds like we will not be penalized now for taking time off work for medical appointments. And then last but not least, it sounds like there is going to be some sort of semblance of a schedule. And that probably is the key here, because railroad workers traditionally have not had a schedule. We're on call, subject to a 2-hour call 24/7. And it seems like to bring us into the modern era, we should have some semblance of a work schedule. Now it says, what I read, voluntary assigned days off. It's hard to say exactly what that means. And the devil's in the details. The rank and file will have the last word. And so it will be circulated amongst the membership in the coming days and weeks. And we'll have a much better idea, probably by this afternoon, exactly what this tentative agreement that was brokered holds for railroad workers.
Ron, could you explain when unions started opposing these conditions? I mean, some of the things that they've been protesting, what you've just pointed out, that workers were penalized for for having medical appointments or taking sick leave. I mean, the fact that there was absolutely no paid sick leave. How long have these conditions been protested? And also, how many unions were involved?
I'll start with the first question. This culmination that's we're seeing has been 30 years in the making. I entered the industry 26 years ago, and I was amazed at the lack of time off, the number of hours that we would work, and you could make good money. This was a job traditionally that you could hold with a high school graduate, and there was a time when railroad workers actually had the ability to do what's called mark off. If you were a brakeman, conductor, engineer, and take a week or two off to take care of business, get some rest, enjoy a new romance, go to Florida. We lost all that. And now it's lean and mean. They do not want one more worker on the payroll than absolutely necessary. So we lost the rights to be able to work when we want and not when we don't want to work. and that has been getting more and more restrictive with the passing years. We've never had sick time, but recently it wasn't really an issue because the right to work when you wanted to and not when you didn't want to was considered one of the perks and benefits of a railroad job in the operating crafts. That has gone away completely and been replaced by harsh attendance policies. And this trend has accelerated, particularly under the new operating plan that has most all of the big Class 1 railroads in its grips right now, which is this thing called precision scheduled railroading, which is just a fancy way of saying lean and mean production. We're going to cut maintenance. We're going to cut costs. We're going to cut staffing.
Can you pause that for a second? That's like when you were talking about that just a little bit earlier, the fact about like, you know, you slim down and then you just like, so everybody at the top gets all the cash, and then you have like a couple people at the bottom who are bearing all the weight, and they just like fired all the other people, and most of the people there don't even know what they're like, they know what they're doing or what they're doing on their thing. But when
it's a conversation that happens a lot. If you have conversations with like Starbucks workers, one of the things that they complain about the most is cutting back shift work. Like you bring less people in, you have less people on the floor, everyone's chaotic, you're trying to get the work done. And why? Like, why can't you have a full staff on so that, you know, people aren't stressed out when they go
before
to work?
before they started, like, you know, because Walmart's cut back on a lot of stuff, they become like a lot more automated for the most part. But it used to be like they'd have like 14, 15 like, you know, registers going, but they only have like 3 people on a register, and there's just like a line, and you have like 11 other registers that could be like filled up. And I remember those kind of things. Like, it's just like it's very visible in a lot of places. And even when I used to work at like a grocery store, they'd be like, we're gonna they don't like to give people full time, so they'll work you to like the 33 something hours, so you don't have to give you any of the benefits, any of the like so it's just they have their ways, and they're very skeevy. You want to play just a little bit more of that, Luton?
Otherwise, do whatever we can to pump up the stock price, increase the profitability of the carrier, reduce the operating ratio, and so forth. And one of those ways to do that is to get more work out of the existing workforce. And it's made for a completely miserable situation in recent years. It was already bad 25 years ago when I was in the freight industry. And so what we're seeing now is workers with 5, 10, and 20 years seniority leaving the industry, something that was unheard of even 10 years ago, is now very, very commonplace. As for the second question, unfortunately, we have 12 unions on the railroad. We started to organize early on. Railroading was a very dangerous industry in the 19th century. And so railroad workers were some of the first to organize, but we organized along craft union lines. This quickly was understood by many union leaders and most rank and filers that was quite inefficient. Unfortunately, in 1926, the Railway Labor Act kind of ossified this archaic system. And to this day, we're still left with 12 different unions, all at the bargaining table, who have the ability to cut deals, reach tentative agreements.
How's it one more time?
And some of these unions actually have a very...
Yeah, we're gonna stop it right there. But literally, yeah. That, you were just talking about that too, like the fact that it's just like you got the administrative union, then you have but then you have these people in the front. It's like you're not part of what we do. You can't be in this union.
And it's intentional. It is an intentional effort to make sure that working people do not work together to be a solid unit to fight against the bosses. Like, it's all intentional. And people talk about police unions all the time, and a police union is not a working class.
That is not the same
union. They're there to protect the people who beat up on workers like that. It's a whole it's a whole different, that's a whole different job. But in the end, the scariest thing for government, for bosses, for millionaires, for stock, the stock market, for Wall Street, for all these people. It's for working class people to realize that we are the backs upon which everything is going, right? And the minute working class people understand that there is strength in being the person, not just who is the consumer, but who is the person who creates that thing which is being consumed, there is great power in that. And it's often misclassified as like, people don't understand the strength in being a person who can create something, the strength in being a person who does the simple job. It's not the best paid job on earth being an educator, but I talk to children every day and I help guide, and I'm 20 years in working with high school and middle school students. It's a very fulfilling job, no matter how sometimes great the pay is not. But I have decades of people who at times come back and say, you really made a difference in my life, and being able to come and talk to you really helped guide me. And that's important. It's important to do those simple jobs. It's important to be the person who makes coffee. It's important to be the person who cleans the floor. It's important to be the person who,
that's
makes
the
sure that
backbone.
the flight goes. Like, that's the backbone of society, and it's something that should be respected. And unfortunately, it just often is not.
People don't respect care work, the work of like caring and servicing people, and like being able to service people, and that's like always under like most of the work that people are more interested in is moving matter, and then the other job is like telling people to move that more matter, instead of like actually no one ever like values the actual like the people who are no one values the actual workers. They only value the people who make the big bucks and do the real work.
Yep.
But Renne, I think we're coming to time. You want to tell everybody where they can find you?
I'm on mostly on Twitter. Causing a ruckus. I'm at our Johnston 815. My DMs are open if people have questions. I really urge people to be open to real talk, right? Be open to real communication. Have the heart and the decency and the courage to speak your truth, right? Because it's so much easier to do the thing that's going to get you the clicks or get you the money or get you the, whatever it is that you think is going to be beneficial to you down the line, but you're selling the soul for that thing. And I don't, for me, it's not worth it.
Exactly. And ADC, do you have anything coming up?
Yeah, 100%. And speaking of truth, we are going to be launching ADC Talking Truth. Renne, I'm going to have you on one of the episodes because you picked the topic. We talk truth about education. We talk truth about government, whatever. The whole thing is my goal is to use the horrible playbook of MAGA, but be truthful with it. So actually giving the voice of the left with truth. So people can we can share the truth, we can all be educated, and we can all move forward with momentum, as opposed to, oh, well, that's okay as long as you believe in this. No. This is the truth. This is what happened. So I'm kind of torn on the first episode. I'm really leaning towards 9/11 because I've got my theories on it. I know your wife has some theories on that one as well. One of our core comrades, Logan, also has some theories. So I'm leaning towards that one because I want to jump out there and I want to really kick it off. But yeah, like I said, it's going to be hopefully a weekly thing. And I want to speak. I've been speaking truth to power for 2 years. That's why I'm not employed, because I'm blackballed from all local business, any of those sort of things, because of the fact that I speak truth to power. And no one wants to hear the truth, but you have to hear the truth, because the only way we're going to survive in this world is the truth, because the truth will set us free. And yeah, we'll go from there. And I just launched, speaking of not exploiting people, the merchandise I do with ballergear.org, we're using a organization. Our core supplier is based out of Ontario, Canada. as well as Ohio and the United States. They're not unionized, but all the research I've done for them, they're paid very well. They get every holiday off. So I don't know many places that actually give the holidays off. So when people are ordering stuff from our site and it's a holiday weekend, yeah, they're not seeing that order go to our distribution center until Tuesday or whatever. So very proud of that. So ballergear.org, we launched the Talking Truth with ADC collection. So t-shirt, hoodies, coffee mug, glass frosted mug. And yeah, we're excited about that. And we're going to launch, and we're going to have Renne on more here and more on our show. And yeah, and let's just keep talking truth and collaborating and eventually taking out this poison that is killing us all.
All right. Well, I'll see everybody, I think, next week at some point on Overlooked News with Andrew. We'll be covering some stuff. We haven't gotten anything together yet. He's been taking a couple of days off. So we'll be getting back to that. But besides that, I am working on a fascism video. So I'll have that out in the next couple weeks. But yeah. So thanks for everybody who joined tonight. That was a great conversation, great chat interaction. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to follow us on any of our platforms, we're on Twitter. We're on well, I don't know if we're on Facebook now. I don't know. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're on Telegram. We're on Twitch, and we're on
TikTok.
We're on TikTok. We're on everything but Facebook, to be honest. But but
I'm on Facebook. I'll be banned from there shortly, so it's all good. We'll have some representation until they kick me off when I tell the truth.
All right, everybody.
All right. Bye. Have a good night.
You too.